January 24th. On the 25th, she had brain surgery at Baylor Scott White in Temple. She's now in St. David's Rehabilitation here in Georgetown. The medical people and what family observe, she is making remarkable progress, and we're just so pleased about that. The current schedule is she will be coming home on Thursday of this week, and of course we'll have home health care. She will have another surgery in about 2 months, and then more rehabilitation after that. So we're looking at a number of weeks and perhaps, and obviously months before she's back to where she feels whole again. And appreciate so much the kind of responses that some of you have made by cards or by social media, by email, and we're very supported by that. We thank you so much. When I was a teenager, my friends and I would sometimes have spirited conversations about the differences among the denominations that we attended. Why did Baptists insist it was improper to baptize children when so many other denominations did? Why did the Church of Christ insist that they were the only church in town truly based on New Testament principles? Why did Catholics, Lutherans, and Episcopalians use wine for communion and the Methodists use Welch's grape juice? One day during one of these conversations, someone asked me, "Don't you Methodists believe it doesn't really matter what you believe as long as you're sincere?" Well, I knew that wasn't quite right. But at age 15 or 16, I didn't quite know how to answer that question. In fact, it wasn't until I got to seminary and started seriously reading the works of John Wesley that I found the answer I wished I'd had back then. In his tract, The Character of a Methodist, Wesley wrote these words: "The distinguishing marks of a Methodist are not his opinions of any sort, his assenting to this or that scheme of religion, his embracing any particular set of notions, his espousing the judgment of one man or another, are all quite wide of the point. Whosoever therefore imagines that a Methodist is a person of such and such an opinion is grossly ignorant about the whole affair. He mistakes the truth totally. But as to all opinions which do not strike at the root of Christianity, we think and let think." And I think you could see from that kind of attitude why some of my friends thought, well, it just doesn't matter what you believe. Well, that's a whole lot different from it doesn't matter what you believe as long as you are sincere. But it still raises the question of what is the root of Christianity? Throughout its long history, the Methodist Church has lived into this question, and sometimes that has produced considerable tension. What is the root of Christianity? What is the heart of our faith? What is the core that cannot be compromised if we are to remain faithful? Church members have honestly and sincerely disagreed about the answer to these questions for all of the 230 years since the Methodist Church was formally established in America. And we continue to wrestle with these questions today. I'm aware that not everyone here today is a lifelong Methodist. Some of you are fairly new to the Methodist Church. Some of you became part of Wellspring because of who we are as a congregation, and it's not particularly important to you whether the name Methodist is attached to our name. But whether you are Methodist born and bred, or whether you are more lately come to the Methodist Church, we all need to understand one thing at least in common. The Methodist Church has always been in the process of becoming. It is always evolving. It is always unfolding. It is always pressing itself in each new generation to know better the heart of Christianity and how to live it out in the given day. It's important that we remember that in every generation, this process has in fact produced tension, conflicts, and stress within the denomination and within individual congregations. Tensions over segregation by race have haunted the church at least since 1787. That's the year African Americans kneeling at the altar of a Methodist chapel in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, were bodily pulled to their feet and told to return to the balcony where their assigned seats were. That led to the first splintering of the Methodist Church, because that led to the establishment of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, which is a strong denomination today and is our sister congregation here in Georgetown. In 1844, the issue of slavery caused a major split among Methodists, and that was not mended until 1939. In the 1960s, a time that for most of us is within our lifetime, the church was rent and rocked by the civil rights movement. Along the way, there were other divisive issues that arose. What's the proper role of women in the church? Could women be ordained? That question was not answered until 1956, when the church finally decided, yes, women could be ordained, but that came only after much debate. When voices within the Christian community begin to call for change in order more faithfully to follow Jesus, other voices may well feel the need to protect and preserve what they perceive to be the unchangeable core of true Christian faith. This very thing is happening today in our denomination. The issue this time is human sexuality. The United Methodist Book of Discipline might be likened to an operating manual for the denomination. It's the official document that lays out the theological grounding of our church, focuses its mission, describes the structure, the various working parts, how they fit together, the respective roles of clergy and laity, and our rules of conduct. It is subject to revision every 4 years by the General Conference, and it governs our life together as a denomination. The first restrictive statements about homosexuality that appeared in the Book of Discipline appeared in 1972. There are other restrictive statements that have been added and that are today in dispute. There are many like myself who believe that judgmental and restrictive language in regard to homosexuality does not reflect the Spirit of Jesus, and therefore should be removed from the discipline. Amen. There are many others who feel that to do that would be a fundamental betrayal of Christian morality. Each feels that the other's position strikes negatively at this root of Christianity that Wesley talked about. This conflict has been building for several years, and it has now come in our church to a moment of crisis. As Pastor Jeff explained in his pastoral letter 5 weeks ago, our denomination is indeed at a watershed moment. A called session of General Conference is meeting this very hour in St. Louis. It is seeking a way to find a way forward that will avoid any formal split within the denomination. Never in my 79 years of life or my 55 years as an ordained minister have I ever known our denomination to be so close to schism. We may, by the end of the week, realize that we are no longer a united Methodist church, but an untied Methodist church. And that possibility breaks my heart. I believe that the root of Christianity is grace. And that grace creates a community of inclusion and mutual caring. It breaks my heart that there are those who find exclusion and judgment more important than inclusion and grace. And it truly breaks my heart that my own daughter, baptized as an infant in the waters of God's grace, confirmed in faith as a teenager, nurtured by faithful congregations all over Oklahoma in her lifelong journey of faith, should now, as an adult, read what is written in our book of discipline. Now, I'm paraphrasing this a bit, but the essence is exactly what's there. All persons are of sacred worth, and that statement is in our discipline. But, in spite of your baptism in the waters of God's grace and your profession of faith in Jesus Christ, we cannot accept you in the wholeness of who you are. We will never believe that God might call you to ministry. And no Methodist minister, including your father, will ever be permitted to bless your marriage to anyone you may come to love. And you certainly can't do that on church property. Now here's where it gets very strange to me, I think. Because after all of this language, then this is there. You are welcome to come and worship with us.
You be quiet.
Just be quiet. I should write that in here. And what we know is that there are multiple thousands of persons, some baptized in the sign of God's grace, some who simply seek a welcoming community in a sometimes hostile world, who are being told they are not welcome in the wholeness of who they are. I came across a study by the Public Religion Research Institute that was made in 2016, just 3 years ago. And that study found that 29% of Americans aged 18 to 29 who spurn Christianity cite, and I'm quoting now, negative teachings about or treatment of gay and lesbian people by religious organizations. That means that nearly 1/3 of all young adults who want nothing to do with the church say it is because of the church's teachings about or treatment of persons who are gay. This should break the hearts of everyone who professes to follow Jesus. Now, I realized as I worked to prepare for this morning that if I was not attentive, this sermon could just become a real downer for us all. And I will admit that over these past months, as arguments have unfolded and positions have hardened, I've experienced everything from anxiety and sorrow to anger and despair. And yet I know, and you know, that if we give feelings like these power over us, we will never have much joy in our lives. So what might we say? In the reading from 1 Corinthians this morning, we heard 5 verses from a much longer discussion the Apostle Paul was having with the Corinthian church about resurrection. He has argued that it is in the resurrection of Christ that their hope of resurrection lies. For Paul, that's the important point, and almost the only point that he wants to make about resurrection. But apparently there's some who want to focus on another question. Well, will we have the same body? And as you heard, Paul gets more than a little testy at this, calls them fools. And he says, well, of course it won't be the same body. Everybody knows you can't grow a garden unless you first bury the seed. It's the same with resurrection. What is buried is not the body that is raised. The resurrection body will be different from that which is buried. New life comes with the passing of the old, and it is only in the passing of the old that new life comes. Now, do you see where I'm going with this? The United Methodist Church, as we have known it, and I stress, as we have known it, may die this week. But our hope is rooted in something else, not in the institution. I believe that God is faithful even when the church is not. I believe that God will always raise up a people to be God's presence in the world. I believe that what God raises up may not look like what we have known before. And I recognize that for some that is going to be difficult. I do not believe that God has decided to kill off the Methodist Church. I do believe that the Word made flesh which dwells among us still dwells among us. I do believe that out of this time of change, God will make all things new.
That's right.
Whatever comes, I also believe this. This congregation, by choices made well before I became a part of this church, has established a firm foundation. I believe that in the new day we face, Wellspring will faithfully continue its ministries of compassion and hospitality and reconciliation. This is probably a good place to recall that last verse from the 1 Corinthians reading. Therefore, my beloved, be steadfast, immovable, always excelling in the work of the Lord, because you know that to the Lord your labor is not in vain. I want to close with the words to a hymn. We're not going to sing it, and the words will be on the screen so you can follow. This is a hymn by an English hymn writer, Brian Wren, who is still living today, though I think he's well into his 80s. It's called, This is a Day of New Beginnings. This is a day of new beginnings. Time to remember and move on. Time to believe what love is bringing, laying to rest the pain that's gone. For by the life and death of Jesus, love's mighty spirit now as then can make for us a world of difference as faith and hope are born again. Then let us with the Spirit's daring step from the past and leave behind our disappointment, guilt, and grieving, seeking new paths and sure to find. Christ is alive and goes before us to show and share what love can do. This is a day of new beginnings. Our God is making all things new. In faith, we'll gather round the table to show and share what love can do. This is a day of new beginnings.